Because one of the unique things about boxing is that in this particular sport, more so than any other sport, controversy sells. Controversy is essentially the backbone on which boxing is built. If everybody was just super kind to one another, if everyone was very humble, if everyone just sat down at the press conference, went on to autopilot, talked from a script, if everybody was just shaking hands and just get into the ring and essentially have a very honourable boxing fight, if that's how boxing was rolled out to the public, nobody would really be that interested. Because with boxing, we have this thing called controversy. You saw it in the thumbnail, folks. Drama. Theatricality. They are all the same thing when we're talking about boxing in this context. Theatricality, drama, controversy. These are all ways to do what? To capture your attention. Folks, you must realize in the modern world, in 2026, you don't just have 9 channels on the television to choose from. You don't just have 10 stations on the radio. Oh no, you've got YouTube. You've got all of these social media platforms. There is so much content on the internet. There are so many ways in which people could use their time and energy and attention. Because there's so much content that we have at our disposal for free. We don't even have to pay for it. We have all of this free content. And when I say free, I mean free in the sense that we don't have to pay money for it. Now, some people will say it isn't free because you have to give up your data. That's fine. I'm not going to get into all of that. And people will say, well, they are tracking you. When you use these social media platforms, they take their data and they redistribute your data out to other places and they abuse your privacy. Yes, I understand all of that. So some people might make the argument and say, well, social media isn't for free. When I say for free, what I mean is you don't have to pay for it. You can go onto YouTube and you can watch content for free. Most people do it. Now, it's important to realize this, folks, because not only do you have free access to content, but there's a shitload of this content. There's so much stuff, both human-generated content, AI-generated content, and a mixture of the two. From sport to entertainment, to politics, to fucking pets, you name it. There's so much content on the internet. And so you must look, folks, at this story with Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing, Conor Benn, Zuffa Boxing. You have to look at this from the perspective of attention. These are promotional outfits. Matchroom Boxing is a promotional organization. Zuffa Boxing is a promotional organization. Conor Benn is a boxer. The more people who know about Conor Benn, the more money he makes. The more people who know about Matchroom Boxing and Zuffa Boxing, the more money that organization makes, or those organizations make. How do they make money? They must capture your attention. If you aren't paying attention to them, they aren't making any money. You do realize this, folks. It is extremely important that they find innovative ways to capture your attention. Now, what happens when they capture your attention? Well, now you are more likely to become invested in what? What are you more likely to become invested in if they have captured your attention? You are more likely to become invested in their narrative. These are promotional outfits, folks. They are trying to promote themselves and their fighters. The better they promote themselves and their fighters and the shows that they generate, the more money they make. Because the more they promote themselves and their fighters, the more attention that they capture from the public. And when more attention is captured, there's an increased possibility or probability that that attention is going to be converted into money. Because when you have someone's attention, they are more willing to listen to your narrative. What is a narrative, folks? I've already said. A narrative is nothing other than a story. It's a story that someone's trying to tell you. Why is someone trying to tell you a story? Remember what a promotional outfit is, folks. It's a sales outfit. Eddie Hearn is a salesman. Dana White is a salesman. Conor Benn is a salesman. These are salesmen. And what does a salesman need? He needs your attention. Because once he has your attention, he can then start to spin you a narrative in order to convince you of something. He spins you a narrative, or, to put it another way, he spins you a story. He tells you a story in order to convert your attention into money. How does he do this? Well, he gets your attention. When he has your attention, he spins you the narrative or the story. And if you become invested in the story or the narrative, then you are more likely to do what? You are more likely to pay money for the pay-per-view to watch the fight, or you are more likely to buy a ticket to go over and watch the fight in person. Who do you think benefits from this, folks? The fighter benefits, and the promotional outfit also benefits. Now, it just also happens to turn out, folks. You see, whenever we are talking about narratives and stories, when you have a salesman, which is what a promotional outfit is, a boxing promotional outfit is nothing other than a salesman trying to convince you of something. How do they convince you of something? They sell you a narrative or a story. Now, this narrative and story, what do you think the promoters and the boxers coincidentally inject into the narrative or the story? They take out a big syringe and they stick it into the narrative or the story. And you know what they inject into it? You know what they inject into the narrative of the story? That's right, you guessed it. Controversy. Because it's not just good enough to spin a story oftentimes. There has to be controversy. There has to be drama. Because if the narrative or the story is boring, then Eddie Hearn, Dana White and Conor Benn are going to lose your attention. They are going to lose your attention to some other corner of the internet. Remember what I said, folks. The internet is an extremely competitive place. It's extremely competitive. There is so much content on the internet. In other words, there's so much competition for your attention. Everybody's trying to get your attention. Why? Because once they capture your attention, they can then spin you a narrative or a story. And if they spin the narrative or the story in an effective way, they can get you to invest in them and their narrative. And once you become invested, you dedicate more attention. And it becomes this wonderfully virtuous cycle for the creator of the story or the narrative. Because the more attention you invest, the more you are subjected to their narrative. And so the more likely you are to be convinced. Because you are exposing yourself to their narrative or story. And remember, Eddie Hearn is extremely good at what he does. You may not like Eddie Hearn, or you may like him. I don't know. But what you cannot deny is he is not just one. Eddie Hearn isn't just one of the best boxing promoters on the planet. In other words, he's not one of the best boxing salesmen on the planet. He's one of the best salesmen in sport. Forget about boxing. Eddie Hearn is a master promoter. He's a master salesman. He is brilliant at what he does. You should take note, actually, listening to Eddie Hearn. You don't have to agree with everything he says or everything he does. You don't have to blindly put your faith in him. But you can appreciate his skill at engineering a narrative, at generating a narrative or a story in order to convince you to invest your attention in his promotional outfit and the fighters that he represents. He is a master at capturing attention. That's his job. What do you think a promoter is? A promoter is there to capture the attention of the public and to direct that attention towards the promotional outfit, the show that the promotional outfit is going to put on, and the fighters that are involved in the show. They are there to capture your attention. And Eddie Hearn, along with Benn White as well, they are masters at this. They are master salesmen. They are masters at the art of promoting boxing and combat sports. And believe me when I say, folks, Eddie Hearn and Benn White, they are keenly aware of the importance of a narrative. It is what allows them to sell their product. What do you think their product is? Their product is their fighters. That's the product. They acquire fighters. And then they promote the fighters. They need the population to buy into the fighters. Because when the population believes in the fighter, they do what? They direct time, energy, and attention towards all the content that surrounds the fighter. And the more the population is exposed to the narrative, the more invested they become. And the more likely it is that they are going to part with their resources. In other words, their moolah, also known as money. They will either buy the pay-per-view, they will buy merch, they will buy a ticket to go and watch the bout in person. That's what they do. This is what a boxing promoter does. It captures your attention and then converts it into money. And how do they do that? They create a narrative or a story. I'm using the two interchangeably, narrative or story. And what do the boxing promoters and the boxers inject into the narrative? You guessed it, controversy and drama. There's nothing, folks, in the world of boxing that sells a story or a narrative quite like drama or controversy. In other words, theatricality. And if you are uninitiated and you don't know that this is happening, then you are going to be manipulated into investing into something that you're not aware of, essentially. You don't even know what's being done to you. And this doesn't make Eddie Hearn a bad person. As I've said, I hugely admire Eddie Hearn for the skill that he employs in the art of promoting a boxing fight. Same with Benn White, all of these folk. But Eddie Hearn, I think he's particularly good at this. And so, let's relate this back to our story. Conor Benn leaves Matchroom Boxing. Eddie's out doing his interviews. It's a dagger in the heart. Disloyalty. Loyalty counts for nothing. Conor Benn leaves Eddie Hearn and goes to his competitor, Benn White, with Zuffa Boxing. Do you not sort of see what's happening here, folks? Open your eyes. While all of you are focused on the loyalty angle, you are being sold a narrative, and you don't even realize it. Please realize, folks, this is not accidental. Sure, as I said, I'm not saying that it's completely devoid here. This story isn't completely devoid of this angle of disloyalty. Maybe there's a little bit of that. Who knows? We'll not really know. But let me tell you what I do know. When it comes to boxing, the boxing promoters, and oftentimes the boxers themselves, they are in the business of not just kicking and beating the shit out of one another. They are in the business of selling you a narrative. Why are they in the business of selling you a narrative? Because they need your attention. And how is it that they can make their narrative more effective? Introduce a little controversy. There's nothing builds a narrative quite like controversy or drama. And then what happens when we have controversy and drama? It captures even more attention from the population. People who are just casual boxing fans are now talking about this. And let me ask you this, folks. Do you think that at some stage, Eddie Hearn's Matchroom boxing is going to be pitted against Dana White's Zuffa boxing? Do you not think at some stage it exists within the realm of possibility that Conor Benn under Dana White is going to face off against a fighter that Eddie Hearn has in the same weight division? Do you not think that there's a small possibility that this might happen? And you see, when this happens, folks, what have we just built? What have Dana White and Eddie Hearn just built? They have built the ultimate narrative. Because when Conor Benn under Zuffa boxing squares off at some stage in the future, and trust me folks, it's going to happen, Conor Benn under Dana White's Zuffa boxing will square off against some fighter that Matchroom has in the same weight division. And you see, when that happens, folks, do you think there's going to be a narrative that can be now sold to the public? You're damn right there is. And there will be. The narrative will be Dana White's Zuffa boxing with Conor Benn, the disloyal piece of shit, faces off against his former promotional ally, Eddie Hearn of Matchroom Boxing. And all of a sudden, we have a narrative. We have a story. And then the shit talk will follow. The controversy will gain momentum like a big dirty avalanche. And then before you know it, people in the population who weren't even interested, they have their attention captured. And once their attention is captured, they are now invested. And once they are invested, that attention can be converted into money. And who benefits? Conor Benn, Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing, Dana White, and Zuffa Boxing.